Yo, what's going on? Hope you're doing well. Today is episode number 2 of the Shop Talk series, and we're going to be discussing tire inserts. I've had this video written down as a concept for a few months now, and after it was requested in the comment section on Shop Talk episode number 1, I figured there is no better time to break it down. So let's get into it. To start things off, what is a tire insert? Well, here is one of them. This is a Cush Core, which we're going to be discussing today, as all of my insert experience is with this product. And what are the benefits? Well, I'll let their marketing tell you. So here we've got unrivaled impact protection, super stable cornering, absorb shock and vibration, lower tire pressure, reduce flats, and superior traction. Hey, that stuff's all sounding pretty dope to me. And it is these reasons why I was sold on this product and actually picked up some Cush Core to begin with. In addition to these benefits, a few riders who I really looked up to, such as Jesse Melamed, were rocking these things in their tires. And overall, I would say like 2-3 years ago, it was definitely maybe a bit of a trend, I would say, to be running Cush Core. Anywho, all of these factors is what led me to spend my own money to buy these things and test them out. So now let's break down what my experience was. My initial experience with Cush Core was in 2021. I was living at Highland Mountain Bike Park for the summer, and I had it installed by the bike shop there in the rear tire of my 150mm travel trail bike. I had a Cush Core Pro installed with a brand new Maxxis Aggressor double down casing rear tire, and that was my first setup. At this point in time, I had slim to no knowledge of technical bike setup. I was just starting to get interested in it, and purchasing Cush Core was a great step in that direction for me, or at least how I viewed it at the time. For instance, when I had built up the 150mm travel trail bike right before going to Highland for the summer, I tossed on EXO casing, Maxxis DHR2s, just simply because they had tan wall tires, and that's the only casing that the tan wall tires are available in, and I thought they looked cool. But for an aggressive rider on a 150mm travel trail bike, you're wanting something a little bit more than an EXO casing tire. So that kind of just goes to show where my mind was at this point in time. So going to the Cush Core was sort of like a good just step in the right direction for me with improving my bike setup. You know, I switched to double down casing tires, which made a world of a difference. And at this time, I was just making like huge strides in my bike setup. So before kind of going into my initial ride feel here, I just wanted to sort of explain where my mindset was at this point in time. As soon as the Cush Core was installed in my rear tire, the first thing I noticed was improved corner feel. At Highland, there are tons of really steep berms that you can just absolutely lay it down in. I'll include a couple clips on the screen right now. And riding those berms at Highland has to be one of my favorite activities of biking as a whole. They've got some of the best berms in all of North America, in my opinion. And I immediately noticed an improved sidewall support feel. Like when I would push in to my feet when I'm going to like really lay it over in a berm, I could just kind of feel where the tire would break away from the improved sidewall support. It was just a really predictable feeling, and I really enjoyed it. Additionally, over the course of that summer, my pace was increasing on most of the trails, and I was starting to ride pretty loose, I would say. Had a couple sketchy moments, and the Cush Core really helped me improve my speed while mitigating the amount of technical failures I had due to flats and the rim protection that it offered. So that was another really apparent and great improvement that it brought to my bike setup. After running the Cush Core Pro in the back of my 150mm travel trail bike, I was convinced that it was the best thing that had ever happened to me, like by far. And when it came time to build up a new bike, which was a 170mm travel full 29er enduro bike, I was like, heck, let's toss it in the front too. So that's what I did. Ran Cush Core Pro, 29ers, front and rear. And when I put it in the front, it wasn't as big of a drastic change as with the rear. There was one instance in particular that I remember hitting a rock gnarly head on, and I still got a flat, but it did save the rim. So the rim protection was still there, but overall it wasn't as life-changing as it was when I installed it earlier in that year in just my rear tire. After the experience that I had running the Cush Core in the front tire of my 170mm travel trail bike, when it came to building up some new bikes in the 2022 season, I decided to make a bit of a change to my Cush Core setup, and that is that I went to the Cush Core XC model in the front tire and then kept the Cush Core Pro in the rear tire. At this point in time, I definitely enjoyed the way that this Cush Core setup felt. However, there were a few other factors at play, which is that I had just switched to carbon rims for the first time, and I had also swapped from running dual double down casing tires front and rear to a DH casing tire in the rear and an EXO Plus casing in the front tire. So this wasn't the most scientific test, but I did continue to run the Cush Core Pro in the rear and the Cush Core XC in the front for the entire season. It felt great, no major problems. My riding kept improving and I kept enjoying the product. Coming into 2023, I decided to build up a few different bikes with different Cush Core setups to further improve my knowledge of this topic. And for one, we had the 170mm travel full 29er with that same Cush Core Pro rear, Cush Core XC in the front. And then I built up the mullet version of that bike, so 170mm of travel but mullet, and I had no inserts in there. I also had a 130mm travel, short travel trail bike with no inserts. And then I had my downhill bike, which had Cush Core Pro in the rear and Cush Core Pro in the front. So we were running the whole spectrum for the most part. I guess no Cush Core XC in the rear, but pretty good knowledge basis for my bikes last year. So after running all of those different Cush Core setups last year, what did I learn? Well, I'm not running any inserts anymore. And it's not because they're a bad product. I think they're amazing and definitely have their place. However, for me, I found that the Cush Core allowed me to raise my level with offering me a certain level of forgiveness. I could get a little wild out there, it would protect my rims, help me in the corners, and since then I've just become a lot smoother and improved my cornering, so I don't really feel like I need it anymore. Take a look at this Cush Core for instance. All of these marks, these could have all been days of riding ended. However, even though I was being loose and probably a little reckless out there on the trail, this product helped me stay out there and kept me rolling and kept my riding improving. Aside from those rim protection benefits, what about those cornering benefits that we talked about earlier? Well, in my experience, the Cush Core really helps you out in the corners when your technique is a little bit off. In my opinion, if you're hitting a corner where you're pushing so hard into that back tire that it might blow off or burp, likely your technique is a little bit off or you're just having a little too much fun shrouding, which I absolutely love doing and am 100% guilty of. But, overall, in a corner, you do want about even weight distribution between your front and rear tire to maintain optimum traction. And I think that sometimes if you're, having this reoccurring issue of blowing off tires and then just toss a Cush Core in, you're kind of masking a bigger technique issue, and it may be better to focus and work on that. With some of the potential benefits of Cush Core now discussed, let's take a look at some of the potential downsides. And the one most glaring downside of running Cush Core is definitely the rolling weight, which is why I decided to try out that Cush Core XC model in the front tire to kind of save on some of that weight. Now, depending on you as a rider, the pros of this may outweigh this one con. However, it's definitely worth noting. Another aspect of the Cush Core that could be perceived as a downside depending on your riding style is that it's essentially working as a volume spacer for your tire. Now, in some back-to-back testing that I did last summer at Trestle Bike Park, I was riding my mullet 170mm travel trail bike with a DHR and an Assegai, and then I was riding my downhill bike, which also had a DHR and an Assegai, both same tire casings, but the downhill bike had Cush Core Pro front and rear. I did notice a bit of an inconsistent feeling in the tires on the downhill bike versus a very consistent feeling on the trail bike with no inserts. That is something you could get used to, and it's a total personal preference thing, but for me, it was a bit of a downside and something I thought was worth noting. So where does this leave us now, and why do I have this brand new Cush Core sitting here? Well, last spring I bought this when I built up my first bike without inserts because I was convinced that I was going to need it. However, I enjoyed the way that the bike felt without it installed and kept running it all year, and since then, this has just sat dormant on the shelf. So moving forward, why may I install Cush Core in the future? Well, the biggest reason that I could ever see myself installing Cush Core again is for the suspension benefits. Now, on an Inside the Line, the Vital MTB podcast, they did an episode with the co-founder of Cush Core, and they discussed about an experiment they did hooking up some data acquisition to a bike with Cush Core Pro installed, and it was very noticeable on the charts that the data acquisition provided how much less small bump chatter was provided to the suspension. Now, it's commonly said that your tires are your first point of suspension, and that could not be more true, and the Cush Core definitely improves your ride feel. From my personal experience, aside from what the co-founder said, when you do have Cush Core Pro installed on the front and rear tire, it is actually quite miraculous how much less feedback there is from the trail in your hands. I really enjoyed that. Do I need that? I don't think so. To further explain, here's a quick look at my wheel and tire setup. I'm running the aluminum turbine wheels from Raceface. These came out last year. I was one of the first people to get my hands on them, and I have loved them ever since. And for tires, we got the Maxxis tires, DHR2 rear, Assegai front, 25.5 PSI in that front tire, and 26.5 PSI in this rear tire. That's my go-to these days. As I've improved my riding technique and gotten a little smoother, I've been able to safely drop my pressures, which has been awesome. Now, my reason for explaining this setup is that with these wheels and tires, I'm able to get all of the compliance that I want on the trail and I guess lack of small bump feedback out of these products rather than needing to additionally add the Cush Core, and I'm able to save the weight. So that's kind of where I'm at these days. So what's the bottom line? Should you be running inserts? I think that's totally up to you. In my experience, they provided my wheels with some extra protection, which allowed me to absolutely get reckless out there on the trails without breaking too many parts. They just kept me riding and kept me improving, which is something I'll always be thankful for. I'm not exactly sure what my riding would look like today had I not kind of gone through this testing phase. So that's kind of an interesting thing to think about. But I don't think there's a hard yes or no. I think it's totally up to personal preference. If you're into tinkering, which if you're still watching this video by this point, you probably are, then maybe give them a shot. They can be a little difficult to install, but once you get them in there, it's an interesting feel out on the trail and something I'd recommend testing at some point in your riding career. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the support, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.